Let me start with a question that surprises many women when they first hear it. Why do so many women notice sudden hair thinning right around menopause? Even when their diet hasn't changed, their stress hasn't changed, and their lifestyle seems the same. You might wake up one morning and notice something unsettling. More hair in the brush, more hair in the shower drain. Your ponytail feels thinner than it used to, and naturally, most women assume the same explanation. It must be hormones. Now, that's partially true, but it's not the full story. Because here's what's really going on inside your body. Your hormones don't operate in isolation. They are deeply connected to another system most people never think about when it comes to hair: your gut. In fact, emerging research over the past decade shows something fascinating. The microorganisms living in your digestive system, your gut microbiome, actually play a direct role in regulating estrogen levels in the body. And when that gut ecosystem becomes imbalanced, something that commonly happens during menopause, it can quietly worsen hormonal shifts that affect the scalp, hair follicles, inflammation, and nutrient absorption. In other words, your gut may be amplifying menopausal hair thinning. Let me explain why. During menopause, ovarian estrogen production naturally declines. But scientists have discovered that certain gut bacteria help regulate how much estrogen circulates in your bloodstream through a system known as the Estrobolome. This microbial network helps recycle estrogen after the liver processes it. But when gut diversity drops, which often happens with aging, antibiotics, ultra-processed foods, or chronic stress, that recycling system weakens. And the result? Lower circulating estrogen, increased inflammation, metabolic stress, and in many women, accelerated hair thinning. Research shows that the gut microbiome in postmenopausal women becomes less diverse, which may reduce the body's ability to reactivate estrogen and maintain hormone balance. And when estrogen declines faster than the body can compensate, hair follicles, which are extremely hormone sensitive, begin shrinking. The growth phase of hair shortens and shedding increases. But here's the encouraging part, because once you understand this gut hormone connection, you realize something powerful. Hair thinning during menopause is not only a hormone issue, it's often a metabolic and gut health issue as well. And that means there are actionable steps you can take, not just medications, but nutrition, gut repair, metabolic support, and lifestyle changes that help restore the internal environment your hair follicles depend on. So in today's video, I'm going to break this down step by step, almost like we're standing together at a whiteboard. By the end, you'll understand why gut health influences estrogen levels, how microbiome changes during menopause affect hair follicles, the surprising nutrient deficiencies that gut issues can create, the inflammation pathway that damages follicles, and most importantly, practical strategies that help restore balance. Because when you support the gut, you often support the hormones, the metabolism, and the hair follicles at the same time. And once you see this connection, the whole picture of menopausal hair thinning suddenly makes a lot more sense. To really understand why gut health can influence menopausal hair thinning, we need to look at a fascinating biological system most people have never heard of. It's called the estrobolome. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Estrogen isn't simply produced, used, and then gone. Your body actually recycles a portion of it through a loop between the liver, the gut, and the bloodstream. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine estrogen as money in circulation inside your economy. Your ovaries are the central bank producing the hormone. Your tissues, like skin, brain, bones, and hair follicles, are the businesses using it. But once estrogen has done its job, the liver packages it into an inactive form and sends it into the digestive tract for removal. At that point, something remarkable happens. Certain gut bacteria produce an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. That enzyme can reactivate estrogen and send it back into circulation, essentially recycling it for further use in the body. The community of microbes responsible for this process is called the estrobolome. And it turns out this microbial network is one of the key regulators of circulating estrogen levels. When your estrobolome is healthy and diverse, more estrogen can be recycled. But when the gut microbiome becomes imbalanced, a condition known as dysbiosis, that recycling system weakens. Fewer bacteria produce that enzyme. Less estrogen is reactivated, and more estrogen simply gets eliminated. Research shows that women with greater gut microbial diversity tend to have higher levels of circulating estrogen metabolites, suggesting a direct link between gut bacteria and hormone balance. Now, here's where menopause enters the picture. During the reproductive years, the ovaries produce strong, steady estrogen signals. But when menopause begins, ovarian estrogen production drops dramatically. At that point, the body becomes far more dependent on secondary estrogen regulation systems, including the gut microbiome. But studies show something important. The gut microbiome itself changes during menopause. Postmenopausal women often have lower microbial diversity and reduced estrobolome activity, meaning fewer bacteria capable of reactivating estrogen. So the body faces a double challenge. First, ovarian estrogen production declines. Second, the gut loses some of its ability to recycle estrogen. And together, this can accelerate the overall decline in circulating estrogen levels. Why does that matter for hair? Because hair follicles are extremely sensitive to hormonal signals. Estrogen helps extend the anagen phase, which is the growth phase of hair. When estrogen drops, hair follicles shrink, the growth phase becomes shorter, the resting phase becomes longer, shedding increases, and suddenly, women who previously had thick, stable hair begin noticing thinning. But the key insight here is this: if gut dysbiosis worsens estrogen decline, then supporting the gut microbiome may help stabilize part of that hormonal environment. This is why functional medicine practitioners increasingly focus on gut health when addressing hormone-related symptoms. Now let's talk about what you can actually do to support this estrogen recycling system. The first strategy is fiber diversity. Beneficial bacteria thrive on fermentable fibers from foods like flax seeds, lentils, asparagus, onions, artichokes, green bananas. These fibers act as prebiotics, essentially feeding the bacteria responsible for producing beneficial enzymes. Second is polyphenols. These are plant compounds that help increase microbial diversity. Foods rich in polyphenols include berries, green tea, extra virgin olive oil, dark chocolate, pomegranate. Polyphenols function almost like fertilizer for beneficial bacteria. Third is minimizing ultra-processed foods and refined sugars, which research shows can reduce microbial diversity and encourage inflammatory bacterial species. And finally, fermented foods can help restore microbial balance. Foods like kefir, yogurt with live cultures, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso introduce beneficial microbes and support microbial diversity. Now, one quick note: gut health alone won't completely reverse menopause. That's a natural biological transition. But improving the estrobolome may help support hormonal resilience, which can influence many downstream systems, including the hair follicles. And in the next section, we'll explore something even more surprising. Because menopause doesn't just affect estrogen, it also changes the structure of the gut microbiome itself, which may explain why many women experience digestive issues, weight gain, and inflammation at the same time their hair begins thinning. If this breakdown is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this regularly, translating complex physiology into practical strategies you can actually use to support your metabolism, hormones, and long-term health. Now that we understand the estrobolome and how gut bacteria influence estrogen recycling, we need to look at the next piece of the puzzle. Because menopause doesn't just change hormones, it actually changes the microbiome itself. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your gut microbiome is like a rainforest ecosystem. Thousands of microbial species coexist: bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms, all interacting with each other and with your metabolism. When that ecosystem is healthy, it performs several critical jobs: regulating inflammation, producing vitamins, maintaining the intestinal barrier, helping metabolize hormones, supporting immune function. But this ecosystem is very sensitive to hormonal signals, especially estrogen. Estrogen helps maintain microbial diversity in the gut, meaning the number of different bacterial species present. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your gut microbiome as a well-balanced garden. Estrogen acts like the gardener. It helps maintain the balance between different species, preventing one group from overgrowing while supporting the beneficial microbes that keep the system stable. when estrogen levels decline during menopause that gardener suddenly steps away, and slowly the garden begins to change. Some beneficial bacterial species decline, other more inflammatory species may begin to dominate. Research has shown that postmenopausal women tend to have reduced microbial diversity compared with premenopausal women, and their microbiome begins to resemble patterns seen in men. This suggests that estrogen plays a direct role in shaping microbial composition. And when microbial diversity declines, several downstream effects occur that can influence hair health. First, inflammation tends to increase. Many beneficial bacteria produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate. These compounds help regulate immune function and maintain the gut lining. When those bacteria decline, the production of these protective molecules decreases. Second, the intestinal barrier can weaken. The gut lining is supposed to act like a selective filter, allowing nutrients to pass through while blocking toxins and inflammatory molecules. But when microbial balance shifts, that barrier can become more permeable. You may have heard this referred to as leaky gut. When that happens, bacterial fragments and inflammatory molecules can enter the bloodstream and trigger systemic inflammation. And here's where hair follicles come into the story. Hair follicles are extremely sensitive to inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation can disrupt the hair growth cycle by prematurely pushing follicles from the growth phase into the shedding phase. Over time, repeated inflammatory signals can also shrink follicles, a process called miniaturization, which leads to progressively thinner hair strands. So when the gut microbiome shifts during menopause, it can create a metabolic environment that quietly works against healthy hair growth. But here's the encouraging part. The gut microbiome is highly adaptable. Unlike genetics, it can change relatively quickly when the environment improves. In fact, research shows that dietary changes can alter microbial composition within weeks. So let's talk about practical strategies that support microbial diversity during menopause. The first is fiber diversity, not just fiber quantity. Most people eat the same few plant foods repeatedly, maybe some lettuce, tomatoes, and wheat, but the microbiome thrives on variety. Different bacteria feed on different plant fibers. One useful goal is what microbiome researchers call the 30 plant foods per week rule. That doesn't mean 30 servings. It means 30 different plant foods, including vegetables, fruits, herbs, nuts, seeds, legumes, and whole grains. This diversity feeds different microbial species and helps rebuild a balanced ecosystem. The second strategy is resistant starch. These are carbohydrates that pass through the small intestine undigested and become food for beneficial bacteria in the colon. Examples include cooked and cooled potatoes, green bananas, lentils, oats, beans. Resistant starch increases production of short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which support gut lining health and reduce inflammation. The third strategy is sleep regulation. This might sound unrelated, but the microbiome follows a circadian rhythm just like the rest of the body. Poor sleep and irregular sleep schedules can disrupt microbial balance and increase inflammatory bacterial species. Aim for consistent sleep timing and about 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep whenever possible. And finally, daily movement plays a surprisingly powerful role in microbiome health. Exercise has been shown to increase microbial diversity and promote beneficial bacterial strains associated with metabolic health. Even simple habits like daily walking, light resistance training, regular outdoor activity can help shift the microbial ecosystem in a positive direction. So the big takeaway here is this: menopause changes the gut microbiome, but the microbiome is also one of the most modifiable systems in the body. And when you support microbial diversity, you may also support the hormonal and inflammatory environment that your hair follicles depend on. If this explanation is helping you connect the dots, consider subscribing to the channel. Every week, I break down complex health science like this into clear, practical strategies you can use to improve your metabolism, hormones, and long-term health naturally. Now let's connect another critical dot, because even if hormones are part of the story, and even if microbiome diversity changes during menopause, there's another mechanism that often goes unnoticed: chronic gut inflammation. And this is where things get really interesting from a physiological perspective. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your digestive tract is not just a food processing tube, it's actually one of the largest immune organs in the body. About 70% of your immune system is located in the gut. That means the gut is constantly interacting with immune cells, monitoring bacteria, nutrients, toxins, and inflammatory signals. When the microbiome becomes imbalanced, something we discussed in the previous section, the gut lining can become irritated. Over time, this irritation can trigger a state of chronic low-grade inflammation. Now, let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your bloodstream as a river carrying nutrients, oxygen, and hormones to different tissues throughout your body. Hair follicles are like small farms along that riverbank. They rely on a steady supply of nutrients and oxygen to grow strong, healthy hair strands. But if inflammation increases in the body, the immune system releases signaling molecules called cytokines. These molecules act like alarm signals. Their job is to coordinate immune responses when the body perceives stress or infection. But when these signals remain elevated for long periods, as happens with chronic gut inflammation, they can disrupt normal tissue function. Hair follicles are particularly sensitive to these inflammatory signals. Research shows that inflammatory cytokines can push hair follicles prematurely from the anagen phase, the growth phase, into the telogen phase, the resting phase. When that happens, hair shedding increases, and when that inflammatory environment persists, follicles may gradually shrink, producing thinner and weaker hair strands over time. This phenomenon is often referred to as inflammation-driven hair cycle disruption. Now, here's where the gut becomes especially important. When the gut barrier weakens, as sometimes described as increased intestinal permeability, tiny fragments from bacteria can leak into the bloodstream. One of the most studied of these molecules is called lipopolysaccharide, or LPS. Even in small amounts, LPS can trigger systemic inflammation. Studies have shown that elevated LPS levels are associated with metabolic disorders, immune activation, and increased inflammatory signaling throughout the body. And once again, hair follicles are among the tissues affected by that inflammatory environment. But here's the encouraging news. Reducing gut inflammation can significantly calm this immune signaling. And when inflammation decreases, the hair follicle environment often improves. So what practical strategies help reduce gut-driven inflammation? Let's break it down into a few simple science-supported approaches. First is omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s help regulate inflammatory pathways and support the integrity of cell membranes, including the gut lining. Good sources include wild salmon, sardines, mackerel, flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts. Many functional medicine practitioners recommend aiming for 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week. Second is polyphenol-rich foods. Polyphenols not only support the microbiome, as we discussed earlier, but they also help reduce oxidative stress and inflammatory signaling. Some of the most powerful sources include blueberries, green tea, turmeric, extra virgin olive oil, cacao. These compounds function almost like natural anti-inflammatory messengers inside the body. Third is eliminating or reducing highly inflammatory foods, especially ultra-processed foods. Many processed foods contain emulsifiers, refined sugars, and artificial additives that can disrupt gut bacteria and promote intestinal inflammation. Research has shown that diets high in ultra-processed foods are associated with increased inflammatory markers and microbiome imbalance. Replacing those foods with whole, minimally processed ingredients can make a dramatic difference. And finally, stress management. This is often overlooked, but chronic stress increases cortisol levels, which can weaken the intestinal barrier and alter the microbiome. Practices like deep breathing, mindfulness meditation, walking outdoors, light yoga can help lower stress hormones and indirectly support gut integrity. So the key point here is this: hair follicles don't exist in isolation. They respond to the internal environment of the body, and when gut inflammation increases, that environment becomes less supportive for healthy hair growth. But when we reduce inflammation through nutrition, microbiome support, and lifestyle strategies, we improve the metabolic conditions that hair follicles depend on. And in the next section, we'll explore another hidden factor that connects gut health and hair thinning during menopause, because many women experiencing hair thinning are unknowingly dealing with nutrient absorption problems caused by gut dysfunction. And those deficiencies can directly affect hair follicle strength and growth. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, gut inflammation is bad. Estrogen recycling matters, but how does that actually make my hair thin? Here's what's really happening inside your body. Your hair follicles are like high-performance engines. They need a steady supply of nutrients, amino acids, and cofactors to grow strong, thick hair. And here's the key. Most of these nutrients are absorbed in the gut. So when gut health declines, whether through dysbiosis, inflammation, or leaky gut, your nutrient absorption suffers. Let me explain with a simple analogy. Imagine your gut as a factory and your hair follicles as the customers waiting for high-quality products. If the factory is running smoothly, the products, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, reach the customers reliably. But if the factory is damaged, inefficient machinery, workers on strike, or supply lines interrupted, the products never make it to the customers. That's exactly what happens when gut dysfunction prevents proper nutrient absorption. Now, which nutrients are most important for hair health, especially during menopause? Biotin, vitamin B7, a critical cofactor for hair keratin production. Zinc supports follicle cell division and tissue repair. Iron helps transport oxygen to hair follicles. Low iron is a common contributor to hair thinning. Vitamin D helps regulate the hair growth cycle and immune function. Amino acids, particularly L-cysteine and L-methionine, essential building blocks of keratin. Omega-3 fatty acids reduce inflammation and support follicle cell membranes. Research confirms that deficiencies in these nutrients can accelerate hair thinning and slow regrowth. ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. So what causes these deficiencies? Chronic inflammation can reduce the gut's ability to absorb minerals like zinc and iron. Dysbiosis can interfere with B vitamin production. Fat malabsorption, often worsened by low bile flow or liver stress, reduces uptake of fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. Antibiotic use or a diet low in fermented foods decreases beneficial bacteria that produce essential cofactors. Now here's the actionable part, how you can support nutrient absorption for your hair. 1. Optimize digestive function. Chew your food thoroughly. Avoid drinking large amounts of water during meals to improve enzyme activity. Consider digestive enzymes or bile-supporting foods like bitter greens if needed. 2. Include nutrient-dense, bioavailable foods. Lean red meat, eggs, and liver provide heme iron and B vitamins. Oily fish and nuts for omega-3s. Dark leafy greens, legumes, and seeds for zinc and magnesium. 3. Support the gut microbiome. Probiotic-rich foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut. Prebiotic fibers from artichokes, asparagus, leeks, and flaxseed. Polyphenol-rich foods like berries, green tea, and turmeric. 4. Consider targeted supplementation under guidance. Iron only if low ferritin is confirmed. Vitamin D if blood levels are insufficient. Biotin, zinc, or amino acids when diet alone isn't enough. The takeaway here is clear. Even the best diet cannot fully benefit your hair if your gut cannot properly absorb nutrients. By supporting gut integrity, reducing inflammation, and feeding beneficial bacteria, you help ensure your hair follicles get the building blocks they need to grow strong. And that leads us naturally into the final core insight. Because metabolism and insulin regulation also play a hidden role in menopausal hair thinning, and yes, it's also connected to the gut. By now, we've talked about gut bacteria, inflammation, and nutrient absorption. But there's one more piece of the puzzle that many women overlook: metabolism and liver function. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your liver isn't just a detox organ, it's also a hormone regulator. It helps process estrogen and thyroid hormones, clears toxins, and metabolizes fats and carbohydrates. When liver function is compromised, estrogen recycling slows down and inflammatory metabolites can accumulate, creating a less than ideal environment for hair follicles. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your liver as a traffic controller at a busy airport. Hormones, nutrients, and toxins are the planes. If traffic is coordinated efficiently, everything lands safely and gets delivered on time. Hormones reach tissues, nutrients reach hair follicles, and toxins are cleared. But if the liver is overloaded, perhaps from excess sugar, alcohol, or fatty liver, the runway backs up. Hormones may get stuck in inactive forms, toxins accumulate, and follicles receive mixed signals. Now, metabolism and insulin come into play here. Insulin is a key hormone for energy management. During menopause, many women experience insulin resistance, even if their weight is stable. Elevated insulin can increase inflammation, disrupt hormone balance, and reduce nutrient delivery to hair follicles. Research shows that metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance are linked to hair thinning, partly through inflammatory cytokines and hormonal dysregulation. ncbi.nlm.na.gov. So what can you do to protect your metabolism and liver and indirectly support hair growth? 1. Stabilize blood sugar. Eat protein and healthy fats with every meal. Focus on low glycemic vegetables and limited refined carbs. Consider timing carbs around activity rather than consuming large amounts at once. 2. Support liver function. Naturally incorporate bitter foods, arugula, dandelion greens, and bitter melon. Include cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, and kale. They support liver detox pathways. Stay hydrated. Water helps the liver flush toxins efficiently. 3. Add metabolic support. Through lifestyle, short bouts of exercise improve insulin sensitivity and help shuttle nutrients to tissues, including hair follicles. Intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating, if appropriate, can improve metabolic flexibility and reduce systemic inflammation. Prioritize sleep. Poor sleep worsens insulin resistance and hormone regulation. 4. Supplement wisely if needed milk. Thistle, N-acetylcysteine, NAC, or alpha-lipoic acid can support liver antioxidant capacity. Chromium or magnesium supplementation may help with glucose regulation. The key point here is that healthy hair growth is not just about the scalp. It's about creating the right internal environment, balanced hormones, controlled inflammation, nutrient-rich blood, and an efficient liver.